Night shift workers. What's the weirdest thing you've witnessed at 3 a.m.? I worked the night shift at a hotel, and around 3 a.m., a guy came down to the front desk in a full business suit that was visibly soaking wet, like he'd just walked through a storm, except it hadn't rained all night. He was barefoot, holding a plastic cup with a goldfish in it, the kind you win at a fair. He set the cup down very carefully and asked if we had a microwave because the fish was cold. I told him we didn't, and he nodded like that confirmed something he already suspected. He asked if the lobby thermostat could be turned up just for a few minutes. While I was doing that, he started telling me he had a meeting in the morning and needed the fish to be alert. After about 10 minutes, he thanked me, put the cup inside his suit jacket like an inside pocket was made for this exact situation, and went back upstairs. An hour later, he checked out early, still wet, still barefoot, and left a 5-star review mentioning the excellent late-night hospitality. I never saw him or the fish again. Story 2, not 3 a.m. but 1 a.m. I worked a gas station next door to a strip club. I had a guy wordless limp in. His eye was all swollen, his clothes were torn, and he looked rough af. He wandered around the store for a few minutes and didn't respond to anything I said. He then walked out and up the street. I noticed as he left that he was missing a shoe. It was really strange. Later that night, the dancers and bouncers came in once the club closed. Found out it was the guy's birthday, and his friends got him a dance on the stage with all the dancers. The place had a very strict no touching certain areas rule. This gentleman received a couple warnings from nicer dancers. Then, he grabbed the wrong dancer inappropriately. This dancer was a known firecracker. She turned around while pulling off her shoe and popped him in the eye with her heel. He pushed her off the stage, the bouncers did what bouncers do, and he lost a shoe in the scuffle. His friends watched this happen and then went back to what they were doing. Story 3 was driving downtown near a major hospital. Saw a very tall man walking along buck naked. Saw a cop working a traffic detail down the street. I told him and he just shook his head and asked, "Why is it always a guy?" Story 4. I used to do night shifts monitoring a data center. The weirdest thing isn't what you see, but what you hear. When you sit in a room with thousands of cooling fans humming at the exact same frequency for 8 hours, your brain starts creating audio pareidolia, basically hallucinating patterns in the white noise. By 3 a.m., I would swear I could hear a distant radio playing or people whispering in the server aisles, but it was just the fans. Story 5. Worked front desk at a Howard Johnson overnight, had some cops walk in and say someone kept calling emergency services from one of our rooms. They go to the room, and I could see on security screens when she answered the door. She was very naked, and one cop walks in and the other looks behind him before going in. 30 minutes later, they come out, stop by the front desk and tell me that she was just drunk and didn't know how to turn off her cell phone. Story 6. When I was an overnight manager for a retail company, we had one individual come in almost every night, go straight to the dairy section, pick up blocks of cheese, and tell them how bad they were. He would then smack the block of cheese several times before moving on to another one. We called him Cheese Spanker. Story 7. A couple of things. I was a doorman working a 12-hour overnight shift for just over minimum wage back in around 1990. A naked woman went off the 9th floor balcony. I was first one there. There was nothing that could be done. She had a piece of bed sheet tied in a loose half hitch around her neck. Her boyfriend said he woke up to find her. He said he tried to save her by cutting the bed sheet, but she fell. I don't feel things, so it did not bother me at all. I finished out my shift as I would expect any employee to do. Another time on that doorman job, some teenagers decided to play gangster. They had put on blue-red clothes to play at being Crips and Bloods and were posing against each other. Then one night, they had a large fight in the park near the property. The front door opens and a kid wearing red comes in. The back door opens and a kid wearing blue comes in. Both have been beaten up and were crying. They find out that they are running back to their mamas and have to take the same elevator. I was working a security guard job at a mall. In the middle of the night, I walk around the end of the building and see a woman at the sidewalk at my own. She looks to be over 40, attractive, and wearing a business suit. I didn't think anything of it. As I walk past her car, I see in the passenger seat a young man in his underwear holding his clothes. I really wish that I could have said that whatever she was paying, I would do it for free and for a long time. Another night at the mall, I saw a truck driving slowly across the parking lot. There were 2 people riding in the back yelling directions to the driver. I caught up to them and discovered that they had left the truck in the lot when they went drinking. And when they came back, they found that all the windows had been soaked up with Irish Spring. It was so thick that it looked like cake icing. They had turned on the defroster to try to melt it, and they skied a little slit in it for the driver to see out of, but it wasn't enough, so he had the guys in the back try to guide him. I recommended that they not drive the vehicle until they could properly clean it, but they managed to get down the ramp and off the property, and no longer my problem. One night, I got a report that someone had hit a deer on the property. I went down to check it out and found that it was not on the property but was on the road. A cop arrived to find the deer still breathing. The two guys who hit it asked if they could have the deer, and the cop said he didn't care. So they picked up the deer and threw it into the back of their rental car. Story 8. I used to work as a doorman in an apartment complex populated by a number of odd characters. One of them was a woman who was schizophrenic. She lived there on rent assistance and got disability payments. Generally, when she was taking her medications, she was still a full bubble off level. Her delusions were all religion-based, with demons and her neighbors casting spells on her through the walls. She cut up the walls and floor with a knife to try to stop the spells, that sort of thing. But every 6 months, she needed to get evaluated to keep her assistance checks coming. The way this should work is that the caseworker would stop in, see that she is taking her meds. She isn't too crazy, check the box. She keeps the assistance. But she didn't see it that way. If the caseworker saw her acting normal, then the caseworker might think she is cured and didn't need the assistance. So she would go off the meds for a few days and then would have an episode. One day she comes to the lobby to tell me that when she was in the elevator, Satan abused her. I checked the elevator. No Satan, no ectoplasm, no readings on the meter. So then I asked her if she was maybe abused by a man on the elevator. Given the type of residents we get, abuser, it was entirely possible. It took a while, but she told me that it was the actual red-colored Satan with pitchfork, horns, and pointy tail. And it was the actual Satan's tail, and she needs to go to the hospital because now she has a demon inside her. So I had to call for an ambulance. Before the M's crew shows up, 2 cops arrive. One is super annoyed to have to be there, and he is even more annoyed that his partner seems genuinely interested to hear about Satan and the demons and the neighbors casting perverted spells through the walls to make her horny. Ems arrives, and they bring in a gurney and set it up. They take her vital signs and tell her that they will take her to the Catholic hospital. She wants to go to the Jewish hospital, which is not only larger but much closer. There is a standoff between her wanting to go to Jewish and the crew wanting to go to Catholic. The Jewish hospital probably has a run on the ER and is diverting, but that doesn't matter to the demon-possessed. Finally, the paramedic says, "You have a demon in you, right? Well, then we need to go to Catholic because Jews don't know anything about removing demons and the Catholics do it all the time." So she says, "Okay," and jumps up on the gurney. A couple days later, she is on her meds again. The caseworker gets to see her crazy episode, and the checks keep coming for another 6 months. Story 9. Not night shift all the time, but a varying shift pattern. Oh, the joys of forensics. Can people crime in office hours only please? So the time-sensitive testing is at a reasonable hour? About 4 a.m.-ish, on my way to a job, man, walking what appeared to be a pet goat on a lead. Man was naked, goat had a jumper and scarf. Man waved and asked if we wanted to pet the goat. Story 10. Answered phones at a Catholic hospital overnight. Someone called in at 3 a.m., hoping we had an exorcist on staff that they could speak to because their son tried to burn the house down. Story 11. Worked night shifts in a hospice. There were 2 categories of patients, those in for symptom control and those actively dying. That night, I had 3 rooms of 3 patients who were in for symptom management but weren't about to depart. They were all in their 70s. At the start of the evening, their collective wives and families had been in visiting. 3 o'clock in the morning. I go for a quick walk around just to check all was okay. Heard some weird creaking, banging noises from one room. Knocked on the door, nothing. Noise continued, so I popped my head around, saw one guy on his hands and knees and another doing stuff, you know. The guy looked up, spotted me, gave me a casual nod and cracked on. I backed out, shut the door, and tried to scrub my brain of what I saw. Guess when your time is nearly up, some people think, "I've never tried X," and go for it. The day nurse had a delicate conversation the next day to check all was consensual and all was good. Story 12. I worked at a small but nice hotel as the night auditor. The pool was across from the desk, with windows around it, and something caught my eye around 3 a.m. I went closer to the glass and saw water falling from the ceiling into the pool. I grabbed the cordless and made my way upstairs to try to identify the source and eventually heard water running in a guest room. I went back to the desk and saw there was someone in the room and tried calling several times with no response. I am a woman, was young then, and working alone. I knew this was a costly issue that I couldn't ignore, and ultimately, the maintenance man came in to check the room with me around 3:30 a.m. When we opened the door, we saw a tiny man in tightly whities, squatted down, frantically scooping water with his hands from the floor to the sink. He apparently got wasted at a business dinner and passed out after starting to fill the hot tub in the room. It was a suite, damage was extensive, and he was moved to a regular room for the duration of his stay. When I saw him the next evening, he said, "Sorry, Drunko, I will never forget it." Story 13. I was zoning out listening to an audiobook on my MP3 player in the frozen foods, changing sale signs and price labels, when a clip-clopping noise caused me to look around. A skinny nude man in a purple bodysuit, day-glow yellow 6-inch heels, a white wig, completely bedazzled Frankenbeans, a mini Hello Kitty purse, and an old manual egg beater was in the ice cream section a few freezer doors down from me, trying to focus on matching barcode numbers and not this disco ball. Suddenly, bam! His sequined sparkle package is inches from my face, and they're tapping my shoulder asking if mint chip or cherry vanilla sounds better in a cone. Both are good. That was the right answer, apparently, because he looked jubilant, thanked me, and threw sugar cones and sprinkles into his cart with the ice cream and clip-clop back to the front of the store. Story 14. When I worked security at a 24/7 gas station, I witnessed 2 cars pull into the parking lot. The drivers got out and threw hands until they both fell over, and they got up and fist bumped and got back in their cars and left. It was like a hockey fight broke out. Knee touched the ground, and the fight was over. Story 15. I used to work in a warehouse that had previously been a wartime assembly line. The rumor was that the warehouse was haunted by the ghost of a man had been killed during an industrial accident. One night, one of the old hands said how he'd turned up a little early one shift to get ahead of a work order. While he was working on a pallet, he saw someone that he presumed was his colleague turning up for his shift, enter the warehouse and go into the office area. Through the internal window, he could see the person moving around inside the office, and he headed over to greet him. When he entered the office area, he was startled to find no one there, and nowhere for them to have gone. It was only then that his colleague turned up, walking into the office area behind him. On another night, a different worker saw a man he didn't recognize walk into the men's bathroom, wondering if they had a thief in the warehouse. The worker followed the man into the bathroom to challenge him, and once again, there was no one there and nowhere for them to have gone. Another co-worker related how when one night, a group of them were standing in one of the aisles of the warehouse when one of them suddenly said, "Do you feel that?" No one else knew what he was talking about, until another man suddenly reacted, and then, shortly after that, another. When they spoke of what they'd experienced, all 3 of them said that a wave of cold had passed through them, that the other people around them hadn't felt. It seems that given the speed at which each man had experienced the unusual feeling of quickly passing cold, it had passed through the assembled group at the walking speed of a man. Story 16. It was probably about 15 years ago at one of my first jobs. I was working overnights at a resort casino, and it brought in a lot of traffic from locals and people out of state since it was off of a major interstate highway. Anyway, I was working and some guy came in. I assumed it was a trucker. He had a black cap with tipped wings on the sides, and it was supposed to have a logo for Icarus, but it had this giant stain on it and read as ISIS. Didn't really care, but he wanted to ask if we had any jobs available, and I gave him an application and he looked at me like I was slow. He said, "Jobs that pay big and right now." I didn't really have an answer for him, but some fat trucker guy sitting at a table eating biscuits asked if he would dress up as Sasquatch and tell him everything was going to be all right. I then realized my mysterious job seeker had one leg and a really terrible prosthetic. He was completely game. I emptied out the cash drawer and was getting ready to move stations when my replacement came up and asked how he was going to get into the readily available Sasquatch outfit with one leg. A true predicament. He figured it out eventually. He just took off his leg and one sad, super fluffy Sasquatch leg just kind of flapped around while he talked to the trucker till dawn. Wish I stuck around, but my shift ended and I assumed someone got something out of that transaction. Story 17. I worked at the only 24-hour pharmacy in town. I once had a woman accuse me of making her feet bleed while shoving her feet in my face because I was sending her bad vibes. I hadn't been thinking about her at all, and also her feet weren't bleeding. I also had people come in who were actually covered in blood and just act like everything was normal. They will just buy something and leave. There was also a guy who came in the middle of winter wearing shorts and a t-shirt. He passed out in the women's restroom and scared the absolute crap of me when I walked in because I didn't know he was in there. He woke up and walked out like nothing had happened. I got to know the local police very well at that job. Also, weirdly, I got to know multiple local escorts. They were always my favorite customers. Story 18. I used to work occasional overnight shifts, 200-0700, for support for the application service provider arm of one of the big telecom companies here in the States back in my early career days. I'm a night person by nature, so it wasn't a big deal for me. What I'd experienced was sitting in the locked support room, which was 2 pods of 8 desks, and I'd hear what sounded like a party from the 1920s or 30s based on the music, around 0300 every time I did graveyard. We all brought laptops back and forth, so there wasn't a ton of computer fans or equipment running, aside from my own. The first time it happened, I just assumed I was maybe half asleep. Then I'd start smelling the booze and cigarette smoke to go with it. I still dismissed it, until a coworker said something to me at a later time, when we were working our regular shift. He'd worked graveyard a couple of days before and experienced that same thing, and wanted to know if I had experienced it, since I was the usual volunteer to cover that shift when the permanent guy was on leave. He was pretty freaked out and didn't want to cover any more graveyards after that. He and I worked 1500, 2300 usually. Story 19. I hosted all-night video game events 2 every weekend for 12 years. We operated 8 p.m. to 8 a.m. Tons of things. A kid pulled an airsoft gun on me. A homeless guy spent $800 a month to attend events. Drunk parents driving to attempt to pick up kids. People would attempt to steal things regularly. Not just snacks and drinks, games, controllers, the 8-ball off the pool table like 4 or 5 times. Many more wired things. Story 20. I worked at night shifts in an office building that had cable TV throughout, with many wall-mounted TVs. One night at about 2 to 3 a.m., there was an unusual alarm from the ground floor server room, so I left to inspect. On passing through the closed reception area, I saw the security guard who was manning the front desk. He saw me, startled, and then I realized why. He was tuned into Playboy TV, sat there with a towel, body lotion, and rubber gloves. Thankfully, the desk was providing him and me with the much-needed privacy. Story 21. Worked overnight at a gas station for a bit. Bad AEA stations had special bulletproof booths for the overnighters. My gas station was fully open. Anyone could walk in and have access to me. The owner and his wife and all of their parents and several of their adult nephews, nieces, lived upstairs. The security system was a broom I could use to tap the ceiling. So many creepy men enjoying my company for a bit. But that's not weird. That's expected. The weird thing was that the owner's nephews seemed to only have birthday parties at night in his truck. Sometimes at random times, including 3 a.m., he's very quietly walk down the stairs and sit in his truck for a bit. Then someone would come by and sit his truck for a bit with him. Then they'd get out and go to the covered bed. The nephew would get a birthday present of a thick stash of cash, and he'd give his guest a loot bag, a small or medium-sized paper bag from the truck. One time he got mad at a guest and hit her in the face repeatedly. Story 22. I get back from lunch break at 3. One time I come back into the cooler from lunch and find 3 of the 5-gallon waste buckets knocked over, one on its side and the eggs all over the floor, the other 2, ISTG, perfectly upside down with all 5 gallons of egg inside, like a jello mold. I couldn't get them right side up without spilling, so unfortunately I did have to clean up 15 gallons of squashed egg. Genuinely no clue how it happened. I was the last person in the cooler before lunch, and my boss checked the cameras to see if anyone else went in while I was gone. Nope. Even if they somehow fell off the cart they were on, I have no clue how they would have landed like that. Story 23. A guy walked into the lobby of the hotel I work at in a downpour, sobbing and without a wallet or phone, because his friends ditched him at a bachelor party for a wedding in a town he wasn't from because they decided to prank him. He was full-on sobbing, but I managed to get him to call his parents. He was like early 20s, and they asked for a number of a taxi company that does e-transfer, of which I knew of one, and thanked me for looking after their son. I gave him water and a towel as he sat in the lobby dry, heaving from sobbing so much. He walked a solid hour before finding a 24-hour lobby from a vineyard. He had no idea where he was and only had part of his Airbnb address he was staying at with his friends. That stole his phone and wallet and left him stranded again in a town he wasn't from and knew nothing about. After the cab picked him up and took him to the now completed address of the Airbnb, thank you Google, his dad called about 10 minutes later to request if his son was picked up in the taxi to verify before he transferred the money, and then thanked me a whole lot for looking after his son. That kid needs new friends. Story 24. So I worked at this Jack Shack on the edge of Portland, Oregon. It was the last adult establishment for almost 100 miles out. It was in a crafty neighborhood, and I bumped into the strangest of things. I saw a lot of things you wouldn't see anywhere else, like twins showing up for a hookup, and their monogamous partner also shows up and it turns into a slap fight brawl. Had a guy jack the tip jar by shoving it down his pants and putting his junk in it, or at least it was how we found him. Escorts loved me and would come in and get naked on the floor to try things on. We had changing rooms, it was all on their comfort level, and then tip me. Had a parade of 12 furriers in full suit come in to use the arcade. Couldn't imagine that cleaning bill. Had dooms with subs crawling on leases. Story 25. I was chatting with the guy who delivered the hotel newspapers when suddenly his eyes turned to the hallway at the other end of the lobby. I looked at my camera bank and timed to see the pool door close. The house person was in charge of locking it, but I always checked, and clearly I had forgotten. I marched down there, opened the door, and politely yet firmly informed the man in the hot tub that he needs to leave because it is closed. He pretends he doesn't hear me for a few moments, and then I become a little bit more authoritative and tell him it is time for him to get up and get out of the hot tub and go back to his room. He then stands and turns to me with the biggest grin. Do you know those little white plastic nets they put some produce in? Well, it looked like he was wearing a thong made out of that. And even worse, or better, depending on your outlook, when wet it was completely transparent, as was my having had enough of his hijinks. Story 26. I worked overnight at a few grocery stores, some that were open 24 hours. The weirdest thing I ever saw was the time Me and my coworkers were outside catching a smoke before we gathered up the carts around 2 a.m. when a car sped into our parking lot, slammed on the brakes. Some chick in a miniskirt tumbles out. She then looks us all dead in the eyes while she squats down and takes a piss next to the car. And without breaking eye contact, she climbed back into the car and it sped off. And the weirdest part, not one of us made any comment about it. Because seriously, that was just a typical Saturday night for third shift grocery store workers. Story 27. I used to work overnight at a 7-Eleven in Falal. I saw some crap. One time this guy came in literally covered in mud. At first glance, I thought he had a facial deformity, but it was like an inch thick of caked on mud. He tried to buy a buzz ball and fell backwards into a display and threw up. After that, he kept coming in and out for like 2 hours until finally some guys came in that knew him and they finally left with him. I had a couple regulars who would come in and regularly break down talking about their lives. And then their husbands, boyfriends, girlfriends, wives, who were also regulars, would come in and do the same thing. They didn't tell me I'd be doing therapy when I got hired. It was also across the street from an illegal casino and had a few times where some very high out people dropped over 1K on scratch-offs and didn't win anything. I let a drunk homeless dude sleep in my car. A bunch of crap. Story 28. I'm a former night shift worker, but I've worked all shifts, and I'll tell you, weird crap happens all day long, not just at 3 a.m. The most recent memory is a lady who was either on substances or needed to be on them. She had a dog with her. I work at a convenience store with a deli. I told her that since we serve food, we didn't allow animals in the store. She insisted it was a service animal, which it clearly wasn't even trained like a pet. She proceeded to try to buy some stuff and wanted to use Apple Pay. I said that was fine. She stood there for at least 2 minutes, going through her phone. When she finally put it to the pin pad, it had timed out. I hit the button and asked her to try again. She again spent 2 minutes going through her phone. Same thing, took too long. After about 5 minutes of this, and after a long line forms behind her, she finally got it, but the card declined. She then said, never mind, left her stuff, and proceeded to go out in the parking lot and start giving out $20 bills to random people. Story 29. Once when I did C-store overnights, a car flew into the parking lot. Door opened, and a dude was very much thrown out onto the sidewalk. Car burned rubber peeling out. Guy was incredibly high. I do not know what he was on, but he was very, very out of it. Still walking around, but you'd think he was lobotomized with how out of it he was. Called the police. They took their sweet time getting there, while he went around staring at various customers who showed up in other harmless but creepy things. When the cops did show up, I found out why they weren't that concerned. This was a weekly occurrence. This guy would routinely take a ridicule-ducking louse amount of substances, and his friends would abandon him at a random gas station or grocery after they couldn't stand him for the night any longer. Cops would be called, they'd put him in a cell for the night, and the cycle would repeat. Story 30, not 3 a.m., but overnight. I worked at a very popular resort on the west coast of Florida. And one evening, a man checked in and asked, he was going up with one of the bellhops. He asked if anyone had ever jumped from our hotel. The bellhop said no. Not so subtle foreshadowing at this time. I'm leaving the hotel, and I saw the two men going up in the elevator. I come back about 8:30 a.m., and there are fire trucks, ambulances, police, the whole shebang. I had a feeling, but it was confirmed shortly after. Not only did he jump, but he misjudged the length he had to jump out, and he hit a few obstacles on the way down, and it was very messy. I suppose he got what he wanted either way. Honorable mention to the man who hit himself in the bathroom while his family was enjoying the beach 60 feet away. Why do people hit themselves on vacation? My only guess would be that they think their family is distracted having fun. Very sad. Story 31. Woman 3X over the limit, drove into petrol station forecourt, hitting one of the pumps, and got out like nothing had happened. She didn't even register that I was on the phone to the police. An addict took a container of waste oil from the back of a restaurant and threw it all over the road. Police had to cordon off the road for hours to get it cleaned up. When the newspaper delivery guy came along, he ignored the police and sped past them, skid on the oil, and crashed his van. Guy smashed a jar of sauce over his own head, walked to the shop, and tried to walk in front of a bus. Plenty of other crazy crap. Odds, fights, girl runs straight in front of a car. I've seen it all. Story 32. The second weekend after I started at a gas station for night shift, and the first night at this location, the two women I was working with got into a fight. One was being a real side-talking crap about how you can't get into heaven being gay, but not directed towards her. They were both kind of laughing, and I didn't know them, so I figured that was just their thing. But they went full on with customers in the store. I tried to break it up, caught an elbow, and gave up, and they kind of zigzagged more to the back of the store. Crap you not. A cop came in just that moment, smiled and nodded at me. I was like, hey, and pointed to them. He had an, oh crap look, and pulled out his cuffs. I finished the night solo and they both got fired. All before I met my manager. I've also been flashed a few times. Only one was cool. Story 33. I worked the night shift at a couple of different stores for a bunch of years, but since we were basically locked in for most of the night and the customers were locked out, I never witnessed anything particularly wild firsthand. But I do have a story or two from coworkers, and I've seen a thing or two when clocking out in the morning. Story from a coworker. Customer had sat down on a patio furniture display while shopping and fallen asleep. The evening staff somehow failed to notice her during their closing time sweep. Night crew found her an hour or two after close. Personal experience? Worked a night shift on the eve of a local holiday. Walked out the front door at the end of my shift to see a section of the garden center trashed. Kiosk windows broken, pots smashed, bags of gardening soil ripped open and thrown around. Most likely the work of some folks who had partied a bit too hard and had nothing better to do after last call. Story 34. Setting a big box. Home improvement store. Activity, a major reset of several contiguous departments. New displays, reorienting aisles, and more. Workforce. A contractor who is doing the work across multiple stores one at a time. Contracted staff are a mix of single locations, more than one in all 19 stores involved. To prep the store for opening after 5 hours of reset, regular employees are being brought in at 3 a.m. every night for a week. On the fourth night, while both crews are present, a contractor on a scissor lift lowers it down, starts screaming, dismounts, and starts running through the back aisles. When he runs to the front of the store, he has ripped off all of his clothes and looks like a wild man. The store supervisor on duty evacuates his people and calls the police. About 10 minutes after cops entered the now unoccupied but one store, they brought him out horizontally in thick orange straps and a sheet. Story 35. Used to work overnight at a dog kennel. Typically pretty quiet as they are sleeping while I clean and prep for morning. There were 2 different rooms of kennels. Both had a good amount of dogs, and in the middle of the night, both rooms of dogs woke up and started barking, like all of them. I walked through both rooms multiple times and nothing was out of place or anything. Very weird. Story 36. I worked as a night receptionist in a 4-star hotel. I witnessed a lot of interesting events, but let me mention one little story. I'm sitting at the reception. The walls were made of glass, so you can look out onto the street at any time. Suddenly at dawn, I hear that there was a huge accident on the street. The kind of sound when a car crashes here and there from houses and fences. Then suddenly I see a BMW that's completely broken down in front of the hotel. The driver gets out and starts picking up the broken pieces from the car. Less than 2 minutes later, the policeman stops by to check. It turns out that the guy had an accident while on substances and was also a CK dealer because his snot was spilled on the car from his bag when they searched him. Story 37. Night desk at a hotel. There was a state high school wrestling tournament in town. I heard a noise out by the pool, so I grabbed the aluminum baseball bat. Yes, it was that kind of hotel. And went to investigate. 20 teenage boys, all in their tighty-whities, were stacked up in the sauna trying to sweat down to a lower weight class. It was, at best, a 5-person sauna. They'd even brought bolt cutters to break the chains on the door. Several coaches were throwing tantrums at the front desk by 8 a.m. Story 38 p.m. Working at the graveyard at a hotel, we were on a downtown residential street. I'm outside having a cigarette. I see someone about a block away walking in my direction, about 2 blocks away in the middle of the street. As he gets closer, I hear a whip, noise getting louder. At this point, the cigarette is gone, but I'm intrigued. As he gets closer, it's a guy with a snorkeling mask and flippers, wearing a pair of Speedos. As he passes me, I nod hello. He ignores me and walks past towards a large park. 5 a.m., another cigarette break. I finish the cigarette, and from the opposite direction, I hear whip. I have to stick around for this. Same guy, walking back where he came from, only this time he's soaking wet. Story 39. Worked at a small bakery. 2 main people overnight, including me. I was a teenager, other guy about 30. He would regularly cover the stainless baker's table with butter and flour, then bang his GF on it. Wouldn't let me clean it before we went back to the baking work, because most of our earliest AM customers were cops, and he hated them. Story 40. I used to work night shift at a self-serve gas station. One time a guy walked up to the window and asked me if I knew coworker's name. I said yes, then he said he had a gun in his pocket and was robbing me with his hand in his pocket. For some reason, tired dopey me took it as a joke and laughed in his face. He looked sort of befuddled and walked away into the night. I mean, he said he knew my coworker, so I guess I assumed he was kidding. The next night, he actually did come in and rob the gas station with someone else working at gunpoint. I mean, what the heck was I thinking there? Story 41. Not 3 a.m., but around 2 a.m. I used to work nights as a mainframe operator. Our building was opposite a nightclub. We would have 2 operators plus the security guard on site. Overnight one night, our security guard called us through to reception, but to be quiet about it. When we got there, we witnessed a couple ducking away on our office doormat. When they had finished and straightened up their clothes, they each went their separate way. Story 42. A full Christmas dinner with turkey, potatoes, stuffing, the works. Except it was July. Chef needed to clear some freezer space up. Really nice meal, but I so wanted to sleep after. Good job there was no alcohol. Story 43. I'm a 911 dispatcher. Used to be on the 7 p.m., 7 a.m. shift. So many wild stories. The guy who intentionally hid himself in the junk? The mentally unwell lady who called us all the time just to talk and tell us what she was hallucinating at the time? Except the one time she dramatically called in screaming, saying that her house was on fire. And it wasn't, but we had to send half a dozen fire units to check. Endless stories. Story 44. I picked up a shift and ended up leaving around 3 a.m. As I'm leaving the building, I see fire trucks in the street near this park nearby and a blanket over a body. I'm thinking, oh crap, a dead body. But then the blanket started moving up and down, like really moving now. From what I could piece together, the fire dep showed up in full force to respond to a homeless guy jacking off in the middle of the park. I left right as the firefighters threw their hands up and started walking back to their trucks. Story 45. I was called out to a tree down during a storm years ago in the middle of the night. It was, as you would imagine, very windy and raining heavily. I was driving to the location, which was a fairly remote part of Scotland, and not somewhere I've ever really seen people walk even during the day. Driving along the road, I passed a woman walking in the rain, pushing a pram on the opposite side of the road. I pulled over and asked if she was okay or needed help, and she just said no thank you. I'm trying to settle the baby. Story 46. Worked at McDonald's overnights. We'd have to shut everything down for like 15 to 30 minutes between 3 a.m., 4 a.m. to roll over the system or whatever. One night, we're all doing our shutdown tasks, and after 10 minutes, I walk by the first window. Window is absolutely shattered. Someone managed to rip a support beam holding up the fence outside, and I guess javelin throw it through the window. The weird part was, none of us heard it happen, and there was at least 6 people working. Story 47. I was a field service engineer based in Abu Dhabi for a wellhead equipment manufacturer. Had to leave town to drive to location in desert early one morning. Walking along the road that leads from a remote field location, by remote I mean nothing but desert for miles around, to the main Emirates highway between Abu Dhabi and the Saudi border, was a female in full-length ball gown, stilettos, glam bag, etc. Stopped and asked her if she was okay and did she need a lift to somewhere. Was told no, mind your own business and move on. Story 48. It was closer to 2:30 a.m. on the boring night shift. Nothing happening. Everyone's sitting around, just chilling. And my station's phone rang. The call display showed a bunch of garbled characters and symbols. I answered it. After a moment of silence, I heard it. The Ghostbusters theme. After a few moments of confusion, I called out to the rest of the crew something like, "The duck is this," and hit the speakerphone button. They all heard it and saw the display. The song finished, and the call ended in Story 49. This was about 10 years ago, but while working night shift at a retailer, we had a customer come through, go to the kitchen section, and grab a knife, and he ended up just hit himself. We had out supervisor go over, and she was mortified. Ended up with the police being called over and him being taken to the hospital. Blood just all over the floor. Janitorial was pissed. Story 50. Not me, but my mother's a night shift janitor for a university. One of the buildings had formaldehyde cadavers, human bodies, stored where she had to clean. My mother swore that she would see ghosts at the end of the hall. The ghosts would slowly disappear as soon as she got closer because she usually thought it was a student, as no one should be in the building but her during that time. She eventually had to change buildings because it spooked her too much. Story 51. I used to sell substances. Weirdest thing I witnessed is a walking into a house, seeing 10 addicts huddled in front of an old-ass TV watching adult film and smoking. Meanwhile, in the corner, some big buff black guy was dressed like Annie Doll. The full getup, dress and all that. And in another corner, a dude was taking a poop, super casual, on the carpet. Moments after, the dude taking a dump gets beat by Django Annie for carpet crawling. Story 52. I met my wife at the gas station I worked overnights at. We bonded over roller grill egg rolls and Minecraft. We've both been diagnosed with autism, if you can believe it. I'm happy, but that's always felt like a weird why to meet someone. Given the time block. Story 53. Psych ward night shifts many moons ago. Admission from police custody a few hours earlier. Hadn't searched for his belongings as we usually would, as he was agitated and the police assured us he and his belongings had been fully searched. Approximately 230 m, this chap walked out of his room and casually laid a claw hammer on the desk. Said, "I changed my mind," and walked back to bed. To this day, I'm not sure if he changed his mind on hurting himself or us. Story 54. Drive around a corner, and there in the middle of the road was a small naked man with a long blonde mullet. If I hadn't been with my mate, I would never have believed it. We went after him and went into his development and was totally gone, like just disappeared in front of us. He got nicknamed The Killinchi Gobbler Story 55. Worked night shift at the front desk of Bellagio. At 3 a.m., a man in a bathrobe tried to check in a rotisserie chicken as his wife. Security showed up. The chicken was still warm. The man was dead serious. Don't ask about what we found in the cavity. Management later sent an email clarifying that food items cannot be registered as guests. Story 56. Someone fishing in our drainage holding pond. I used to go chill out on the loading dock when nights were slow, and one day I walk out and there was a fishing rod and smoldering cig on the sidewalk. We used to keep goldfish in there to show the EPA the water was safe enough, but why the duck was sneaking into our property at night to fish goldfish. Story 57. While doing graveyard janitorial, I met Japanese metal band deer, N. Gray. It was at an auto shop and they were getting their tour bus serviced. I'm assuming emergency since it was nearing midnight. I walked around the corner and was very shocked by the sight of 5 leather and spike-clad Japanese dudes sitting in the lobby. But I think my random ass actually spooked them more. Story 58. In October 2023, I was with my boyfriend in his 2-seater about 30 miles north and saw a circle of about 20 or so East Asian-looking high schoolers across what looked like a poorly lit football stadium without markings, possibly drunk, singing what I perceived to be Japanese enka rap. It was freezing, and they were shirtless. To this day, I can't figure out what that was about. It creeped us out so much. Story 59. I got off work one night, went to get some gas. Older dude at the gas station asked me if I knew where some escort were at, because he needed some pussy bad. Story 60. Riding my bike home from work between 2:30, 3 a.m. after last call on a Friday night, rode by a dive bar that was emptying out after last call. A man was getting tossed out of the bar with his pants around his ankles, violently crapping all over the sidewalk and complaining about them not letting him finish his drink. I started taking a different route home after that. Story 61. Not 3 a.m., but still night shift, I worked across the road from a Yakult headquarters and was having dinner in my car and saw an affair happening. Last bent over, hands on the window, standing next to the 2-tum tall Yakult bottle lit up by the downlighting. Can only assume it was an affair since they close at 5 p.m. and the 2 cars pulled up at nearly 9 p.m. Story 62. I used to do surgery on mice as a part of research at a hospital and once has to do a post-op around 2 a.m. I went to the vivarium, where all animals are kept in different rooms, and walked in on 2 people doing it in a room full of mice. Story 63. A guy screaming 2-3 times a minute for 3 hours at 3 a.m. Yes, this lasted from about 3 a.m. until about 6 a.m. It was weirder still is how the cops or M's didn't come after he had gotten beaten up by a guy who got sick of it. Multiple people called 911 over him, including clean and safe, both before and after he got beaten up. Story 64. Can't recall anything specific, but during college, I did 3rd shift stocking at Walmart, and a lot of strange, disabled, or deformed people would shop. I'm sure it was easier to shop at night and not be stared at. Story 65. Train operator. I knew I was at the seat when a woman walked on the tracks, laid down, and let the train hit her. The slightly weirder thing was that the train co had a school for rehabilitating. It didn't work, and he never returned to work either. Night shift workers of Reddit, what are some creepy things you've experienced in the middle of the night? Story 1. I used to work overnight shifts at a restaurant with a drive-thru that I was also in charge of. There was a bird who cooed into the drive-thru speaker and into my headset that kept scaring the crap out of me until I finally realized what it was. Story 2. I used to work at a pub that was 2 miles from my house. My shift ended at about 11 one night. I stayed there for a couple of drinks, then started walking home. Now, this had been an exceptional night for me tip-wise, and I had close to $400 in cash on me at the time. Between the pub and my house was exactly 1 streetlight, about a quarter mile from the pub. The rest of the walk was in complete darkness. This was a dark night too. It was close to the new moon and cloudy to boot, so it was almost pitch black. Now I live out in the boonies, so there isn't even much light pollution to help out. Not long after I leave the pub, a car slowly drives by me. About a quarter mile down the road, the car slows to a stop and it just sits there. I stop walking and watch the car. It sits for a few minutes, then slowly drives away. A couple of minutes later, the same car comes slowly driving back by me in the opposite lane. It gets by me, drives a bit down the road, and slows to a stop again. Then it does a U-turn and starts creeping back down the road towards me with the lights off. At this point, I'm ducking terrified. I don't have a cell phone at the time. There's no one around to see what's going on. The car is between me and the pub, so I can't get back to the safety there. My house is still about 1.5 miles away. No way I can quickly escape there. I quickly run off the road, into the woods, and duck down behind a bush. I watch for the car, but it's too dark to see it with the lights off and bushes, trees, undergrowth between me and the road. I sit there for about 10 minutes, but don't hear anything. I'm about to make my way back to the road when I hear car doors closing. Now I'm really panicking. It feels like my chest is about to explode. The hairs on the back of my neck is standing up. I keep imagining someone sneaking up behind me. I stay hidden and hope to God doesn't find me. I don't know how long I stay there, but I eventually hear car doors again, then cars passing by. I give it a couple of minutes, then ease back to the road. When I see it's clear, I haul ass back to the pub and let my boss know what happened. He said then and there that I'm never to walk home at night again. Either him, his brother, or his mom will give me a lift home. When the other servers and the kitchen staff hear what happened, they all say the same thing. Never been that terrified before. Story 3. I work at a cafe in downtown. Quite a few homeless shelters in range, and a huge substances problem. One day I'm working behind the bar, and this redhead kid, probably in his early 20s, sits down in our seating area and starts chanting crap under his breath. After a minute or two, he starts moving his hands around like he's casting a spell. He then gets up, starts yelling and disturbing everyone. I walk over to him and tell him he needs to leave for the day. Dude looks me straight in the eye and says, "This is all a giant game. I'll ducking hit you with one finger." At this point, whatever. I get death threats a lot down here. No biggie. Shoo him on his way, and that's that. Fast forward to when we're closing up, around 9 p.m. Not technically night shift, but it gets dark up here, so it counts. I lock the doors and start heading to the parking garage my car is in. It's probably about 6 blocks away, no big deal. Winter up here is insanely dark, so it's already pretty creepy in downtown. About a block or two of walking, and I hear this hissing noise. I freak the duck out because I can't see anyone around. I pick up the pace a bit, then I hear hurried footsteps in the snow behind me. Duck that. I booked it to the staircase for the garage because I wasn't going to wait for the elevator. I'm about a staircase up a staircase, and I hear the door I just went through slam shut. I finally made it to get in my car as fast as possible. I look around, and lo and behold, there's the redhead from earlier. Only this time he's ducking furious. He sees me in my car and books at full speed and starts hitting my windows, screaming, "I'm going to ducking lost you." I door checked him and drove the duck away. Called the cops the next morning and they found the dude. Apparently he thinks he's in the Illuminati and completely corroborated my story to the police. Small jail time and 1 restraining order later. Never seen him again. Crap like this happens a lot. Story 4. Not exactly night shift, but as a bartender, I'm usually heading home around 2-4 a.m. On a slow Monday night, we were about to close the restaurant when a seemingly homeless woman walked into the bar. Working in a city, we're used to vegetarians making their way into the bar, so kicking her out would be easy. My manager yelled to her, "Hey, sorry, we're closing up. We won't be able to serve you. You'll have to leave." She kept walking slowly and silently toward the bar, staring straight ahead with a blank face. As she walked closer, we realized she looked unusual for a homeless woman. Her skin was gray. I've never seen a skin color like hers in my life. It wasn't dirty or old or tanned. It was a very light gray that was tight with almost no wrinkles. She also had a tattoo of 4 lines on her face. They all started at one point in the center of her chin, then continued down her neck in a ray-like pattern. She also had no shoes on. Once she reached the bar, she went to pull out a chair when my manager yelled again, "Hey, we're closing up. Also, you can't be in here without shoes on. You need to leave now." She continued to sit down, then turned her head slowly to me. Locking eyes with me, she said, "I like you." At this point, my finger was on the bar panic button. Most bars have them so they can get immediate police response. Our bouncer finally made his way over and put his hand on her shoulder to ask her to leave. The minute he touched her, she broke out into this extremely loud, high-pitched, manic scream. It was like a scream out of a horror movie. What made it creepier, the whole time she was screaming, she was looking at me dead in the eye without blinking. She wasn't moving, so my bouncer went to forcibly remove her from the bar. I pushed the panic button and watched my bouncer pull away this woman as she was screaming uncontrollably, all while staring straight at me. The police came fairly quickly and took the woman away. To this day, that is still the creepiest night I've ever had at work. Story 5. I work in the ER, and I frequently work overnight shifts. One night I was sitting at the front desk by myself, and I heard the front doors open, but nobody walks in. So I get up to go see what the hell is going on, or if anyone needs help. I go into the vestibule as it was empty, and I want to see if anyone is outside. Nobody is there, not even any vehicles. At this point, I shrug it off, but then I look down and see a massive pool of blood, like trauma level 1 massive. I immediately called the nurses to come up, and we all scout out the area. We didn't find anyone, and to this day, I wonder if that person survived. I just wish I could have helped. Very creepy experience. Story 6. Used to work late shift as classroom support for a college. We didn't get a lot of high-priority calls from night classes, so among other duties, we'd get a lot of repairs and maintenance done that couldn't be done when the classrooms were in use during the day. I don't mind the dark, so I wasn't in the habit of turning lights in classrooms on if I was just going to do something really quick on the computer. Well, I had a ticket to install something on the instructor PC in a classroom I had never been to before. It's about 10 p.m. when I get around to this ticket, and I head into the room. I got about halfway across the room and then suddenly freeze. The hair on the back of my neck is standing up and I feel 100% that I'm being watched. No, I'm surrounded. Then as my eyes start to adjust, I see them. This entire classroom is encircled by hospital beds sticking out from the walls, and in every bed there's a person sitting up, looking right at me, ducking crap. "Oh, I'm sorry," I blurt out, before finally realizing that they're all just plastic dummies and I was in a nursing classroom. Story 7. When I was in Afghanistan, we were in the mountains right on the Pakistani border. The first few months of the deployment were pretty hairy, but as soon as winter rolled around and the fighting season dried up, things got really quiet. Night shift went from, "When are we going to get hit?" to, "What kind of weird crap am I going to witness tonight?" I think it was February or so, and I was out on guard in the north-facing machine gun shack. We all had night vision devices, nods, so since it was pitch black, we always wore them on night shifts. Well, I was looking out into the mountains when I see what looks like a dude come crawling out from behind a boulder up the hill about 100 meters. Being February, we hadn't gotten hit in almost a month because there was 2 feet of snow on the ground and the temps were hovering right around zero. So the Taliban chucked deuces back to Pakistan and left us alone for the cold months. Now, this dude was on all fours, like a ducking animal, just sitting there, half behind a boulder, seemingly staring into my soul. So I pointed the machine gun at him and turned on the visible laser. Put the laser right on his nose, didn't get a reaction, nothing. Dude just stared at me. So at this point, I'm getting a little freaked out. I'd been blown up, almost RPG'd, and now some local is playing duck-duck games. I radios into our Tokai Tactical Operations Center that there was an unarmed local staring at me on the North Post, and I either wanted someone to clear me to wax him or come out and look at what I was seeing. E5 on the radio tells me he's sending a private out to babysit me, ducking banana. Dude comes out, looks up at the hill at this dude, and promptly nopes the duck out, goes back to the talk, and tells the E5 that there really was a dude just staring at us out on the mountain. So the E5 comes up to the shack and I point this dude out. I crap you not. As soon as the E5 gets eyes on the local, the dude jumps up, hops up on the boulder, and starts ducking, screaming like somebody just dipped him in boiling water. Guard tower at the east corner can now also see the guy. And as soon as the crazy local started howling, East Shack loosed about a 30-round burst of 7.62 out over his head. That crap is loud when it's dead quiet. Crazy guy jumps off the rock and runs down the mountain, screaming the whole way. Dead quiet the rest of the night. But the commander upped security to 50, meaning half the dudes on our outpost had to pull security the rest of the night. The running joke for the rest of the winter was to be on the lookout for the mind control experiment that the CIA lost track of. Freaked me, the ever-loving duckout. Story 8. I used to work overnight phone support for enterprise customers, specifically those in a PACE. Frankly, our market segment there was very small. On average, each person working got 3 to 5 calls a week. The office building we were in used to be a shipping-receiving warehouse and had horrendous sodium vapor halogen, so we petitioned to have the lights turned out at night. This one evening, I was watching Frailty with headphones while waiting for my next call. I remember it being a very tense moment in the movie, and I heard a growling over my shoulder. I quickly checked nothing there, chalked it up to the movie. A couple of minutes later, I hear the growling again. It's not a dog, it's not the movie. I tap one of my coworkers, ask if they hear it too. He does, so we start searching. I end up the far corner of the cubicle farm area and I hear the growling again and it's right behind me. I turn around and there's nothing there. The growling is right in front of me. I peek into the large manager's cube and there's the growling. The security guard asleep under the desk. This jackass picked the only section of the building that had people staffed overnight and the only section that required badged entry. The next morning on my way out of the building, I told the security guard that there were some odd noises coming a manager's cube. He went pale and said, "I'll have to add that to my report." Story 9. I worked at Walmart overnight for a while. Every single Friday night, without fail, this old woman with 2 children would come in at around 10-11. She was obnoxiously loud as she shopped. She grabbed a bunch of different things and stuffed it all in her cart, a few times asking one of our employees to help her grab something. Every Friday night, it was the same thing. Her talking voice was her yelling and stayed in the store sometimes until 5 a.m. I worked 10-7. She grabbed a cart full of stuff which seemed like it was from every section of the store. She would do this with her 2 girls, and the weirdest part wasn't even that. It was the fact that she would leave her cart somewhere and walk out with nothing. Spent hours in the store grabbing a bunch of crap with her 2 kids, and walked out without anything every Friday. I never figured out why. It's not creepy scary, it's more creepy weird. There was also a creepy sad time where this woman was shopping and she was obviously high. Her face showed it. She was basically unresponsive to anyone and anything as she walked through the store. I only saw her once walking by with her kid. He was about 7, saying things like, "Hey, can you hear me? It's me. Why aren't you talking to me?" Stuff like that. Really sad. But yes, those are my overnight stories. I don't work there anymore. Story 10. I work night shifts at a gas station. During the weekdays, it's pretty quiet. It's usually only the truckers and taxi drivers who pop by for coffee and the sandwiches we have. But one night I was talking crap with one of the cab drivers. A car drives into the lot, parks, and it sits with its floodlights on, bright aim towards the glass front. Kind of weird, but maybe the guy forgot what light he got on. It happens. The guy finally enters after maybe 5 minutes of flooding the store part with light, and it's obvious he's on something. He's jittery, wide-eyed, looks dishelmed, paces around before he buys a coffee, and stares intensely at me throughout the purchase. Worth mentioning, I'm a 5'2" chick with the opposite of a resting Karen face. I smile friendly to everyone, but I work alone for 8 hours in the dead of night. Eerie guy pays for his coffee without a single word, despite my friendly chattiness. So I continue talking with the cab driver, but I still feel this guy staring at me. It was very intense and unsettling. Cab guy probably notices this and leans on the counter and slides his card over, talking a bit hushed, that I should call when I get off work if that guy sticks around, because he's getting creepy vibes from him. Cab guy was right. This guy stuck around the shop for about an hour till closing, staring at me clean up, until some truckers arrived. Then he left and sat in his car, parked up against the window, staring until closing time. I called cab guy and he gave me a free ride home. He later told me this weirdo had been driving behind his taxi with his lights on full power. The whole thing was just creepy. Story 11. Used to work night shift at Toys R Us. At night, they would turn half of the lights off to save on power, and the girls' toy section at night was so ducking creepy. You're carrying a box down the aisle, and it's perfectly silent. Then the motion sensors on the dolls will catch your movement, and all at once, the toys will turn and follow you with their lifeless eyes before screaming or laughing or crying in that horrible electronic box way and flailing about. I am a fully grown, 6'4", 300 pounds hairy-assed man, and I have never noped my way out as fast as getting away from that section at night. Story 12. I decided to get up to smoke a cigarette at my back door. Scared, I decided to turn on the outside light so I wouldn't be standing next to an open door to the pitch black outside. I flipped the light on and there's a goddamn 100 pounds husky staring back at me. I almost crapped myself. Turns out, I forgot to let one of my dogs back inside. Story 13. My brother moved in with me a few months ago and got a job doing night shift custodial work at a nearby high school. His workday starts at 10 p.m. and fortunately for him, it's close enough to walk because he gets off shift about 20 minutes after I have to leave for work in the morning, and he doesn't have a car. One night, a little after midnight, he calls me in a panic, asking me to come down and pick him up because there's some kind of weird crap happening, his exact words, and there's no way he's sticking around by himself. My brother isn't the sort to freak out over nothing, so I hop in the car, in my jammies, and head down to the high school. A little background is needed here. As children, my brother was apparently sensitive. He often talked about various seemingly supernatural encounters. In one very old house we lived in, he told our parents that a man would come to his room at night and tell him bedtime stories. It wasn't until we were grown up that our father told us that a distant relative ended life in the same room that was my brother's bedroom, years before either of us was born, and that my brother's description of the man matched the deceased relative. I'm the exact opposite. Nothing creepy or supernatural ever happens to me or around me. If it happened there before, it doesn't happen when I'm there, and often doesn't return after I leave. I've had enough perplexed people tell me that their ghost went away after I visited their house, or that a particular place stopped being creepy after I was there, or had someone acting crazy calm down when I talked to them, to be pretty sure that I'm some kind of natural repellent for creepy crap. So I get to the high school, and my brother's standing by the front doors. He runs over to the car and tells me that I have to come and make it stop. It was the sound of lockers opening and closing just out of sight. He would turn a corner of a hallway and hear a locker open and slam close behind him, or around the corner of the next hallway. We go into the school, my brother practically hanging on my arm, which probably looked hilarious as I'm shorter and plump, and he's tall and super skinny, like a modern version of Laurel and Hardy. We walk up and down all the halls. Nothing happens. No sounds, no movement, no lockers opening or closing, no cold spots, no inexplicable drafts, no creepy noises or feelings. We walk down the last hallway, at which point it's getting on for 1 a.m. and I'm tired and just want to go back home. There's one locker standing ajar, and as we approach it, my brother reaches out to close it, pulls his hand back and says, "You do it." I close the locker. Nothing happens. Finally, my brother says I can go, as long as I promise to come back the next night if there are any more problems. A week later, he comes home and hands me a thank you note and a $50 Amazon gift card from the head of the custodial department for services rendered. Easiest $50 I've ever made. Story 14. It hit crunch time towards the end of a project, and there was a lot of people in the building I work in just chugging away to their deadlines, commonly until 5, 6 a.m. So not night shift, but close enough. Anyways, it hits 4:45 a.m. and I decide to head off home for some sleep to then come back in for 10 a.m. say bye to some friends, and promptly begin to head back home, which is barely a 15-minute walk away. As I walk across the car park, I spot a guy walking on the pavement way on the opposite side, dressed in a full black tracksuit with his hood up and cap down, naturally just a suspicious guy, and me being kinda small. I keep my eye on him. I hit just towards the other two buildings on my work site and I hear him shouting, turn my head to look, and he's clearly aiming it at me. Very hostile, but unable to make out the words. I picked up the pace, walking between these buildings, and decide to look back over my shoulder. There he was, arms up in the air, walking menacingly towards me in the center of the road. Now I should add here, the car park we have is very big, and there would have been no way the guy would have crossed it in the minute or two it took for me to be where I was without running. This guy was definitely out to terrorize me. I've never been stalked in my life, and at this point, a dry fear came over me. Immediately, I worked out my options. Run, walk to the student dorms in view, and pretend to be a student locked out. Keep walking home, go back to my work building. I pretty much decided all of these were moot, as I didn't want to get chased at close to 5 a.m., be trapped outside a building with a guy who could easily catch up to me as I stood pretending, or let the guy know where I lived, especially since there were a lot of dark places I could just see myself be dragged down by the guy. Finally, with going back to my workplace, to avoid turning back on myself and him, I'd have to walk down an even darker alleyway, which I don't like doing during the day, let alone night. So I just kept walking, picking up my pace, not enough to be obvious, but enough for me to make some distance between us. Walked past the dorms, turned onto the main road where there were streetlights, and immediately took out my phone to ring one of my coworkers. I literally blew up his phone as I kept my other hand in my pocket but wrapped around my keys, so if it turned nasty, I would have a weapon to do some small damage. Thankfully, after 6 times, the coworker picked up and immediately ran out to where I was, staying on the phone with me. I ended up dashing into the first takeaway place that was open and just stood waiting for my coworker to appear. The guy never followed me down the turn I took to get to said takeaway. He must have just carried on walking. I got walked home, and whilst I was a little nervous walking home late at night afterwards, I'm not afraid of doing it again. Just a little more cautious now, and often tell someone when I'm about to head off that I'll message them when I get home. Nothing bad's happened since, and that was close to 2 months ago now. Story 15. I used to work night shift as a guard in a prison. One night, I found a knife just laying out in the open in the dark, empty kitchen. This is really bad because it means that about 2 safety checkpoints have been missed. All the sharps are supposed to be locked up and counted at the end of the inmate's shift, and the assumption is that it might have been deliberate. You know, a weapon left out for someone to attack someone else. It was pretty creepy, seeing that lone knife laying on the counter in the dark kitchen, everything else perfectly clean. My head was on a pretty dramatic swivel until I got to the captain's office. Also, in the middle of the night, I'd have to walk around the building a few times. Did you know raccoons will growl at you from the bushes, even though you can't see them? I sure didn't. When I came inside wide-eyed saying, "I think I heard growling in the bushes. Am I nuts?" They were all, "Oh, that's the raccoons. Thanks for the heads up, guys." Story 16. A few years ago, I worked night shift at a hotel. It wasn't super fancy, but it wasn't a seedy motel or anything either, and it was in a decent area of town. It was geared for extended stay guests, who were mostly there for work. There were not a lot of late arrivals, so it was a pretty nice gig. I got paid to just kick it in the back room and browse Reddit until the sun came up, which is what I was doing with my nights anyway. After midnight, we locked the front doors. If someone sounded the buzzer, I could open the doors manually to let them in. One night, at about 1 in the morning, a young woman ran up and began pounding on the front doors. She was screaming at the top of her lungs, "Please help me. Open the ducking doors. Please don't let them get me." Crap like that. So I opened the doors for her and grabbed the phone and punched in 911. She sprinted in, and I just watched the doors close behind her, agonizingly slow, positive that her attackers would slip in before the automatic doors closed and locked again. But no one came. She kept babbling, telling me to call the police. "Call the police, please. You can't let them get me." She kept saying them, which freaked me out more than anything. I was already calling the police, of course, and I told her as much, but this didn't seem to calm her down. I informed the police of the situation, and they immediately asked me if she had gotten out of a specific taxi. I can't remember the cab company name. I didn't know if she had or not, so they said they were sending some officers over. After I got off the phone, she was a little calmer, but she kept looking frantically around the lobby. I tried to assure her that everything would be fine, but it didn't seem like she heard a word, I said. She started to wander off down the hall, so I followed her. She went into our large conference breakfast room, where she backed herself up into a corner, now staring directly at me with increasing terror. I kept telling her everything was all right, and I did not approach her. I just wanted to keep her in my sight, but I had no desire to get close to her. I tried asking her what had happened, but she would not respond. She just kept telling me I had to help her, and that she was afraid they would get her. I told her it was okay, that I had called the police. She looked horrified at that and asked me why I had called the cops on her. I explained I'd called the cops for her, not on her, and that the police would be there to help keep her safe. To which she responded, "Don't ducking touch me." I was roughly 50 feet away from her and had not moved at all. It was about then that my fear started to ease up because I realized there probably wasn't a them after all, and this girl was simply having some sort of mental break, probably substances related. The cops arrived shortly after, and rather than being relieved, she was scared of them and was reluctant to speak. They sat her in a chair in the lobby and tried to ask her name, but she just drew her knees up to her chest and started hyperventilating. Then she got up and speed walked down the hall. Cops ended up escorting her out of the building. She wasn't struggling or screaming, but she definitely seemed distraught and confused. When it was all said and done, I reviewed the security footage from outside the hotel, and it looks like she had been in a cab on the road next to the hotel. Then she had bailed out of it when it slowed down for the stoplight, and she had come running immediately to our front door, screaming. At no point was she pursued by anyone or anything. From what the police told me, the cab driver called the cops before I did, since she had skipped out on the fare. I never knew what happened to her after that. I didn't see her on the arrest reports, so I don't think they charged her with anything, and I hope they were able to get her somewhere safe. Story 17. I'm an it guy who frequently works overnight when no one else is in the building. We have a white noise machine installed in the building that keeps the voices of all of the cubicle dwellers from blending together into a madding noise. In an empty building, though, it sounds exactly like someone whispering into your ear, just soft enough that you can't make out the words. Figuring out how to turn that crap off was a high priority in story 18. Okay, not sure if this qualifies, except I work nights and this was at night. Being a thick-skulled teen overcharged with attitude and a loose grasp of what I should really be doing, I butted heads with my father frequently. Nothing physical beyond the type of fatigue that hits you after a 2-hour argument about the drop of Kool-Aid on the floor. I'm sure he meant well, but at the time I thought it a bit excessive. At some point, we decided it's best to split company, and I went to Job Corps, graduated, got a real jobs, and reenacted the highlights of my previous years with my bosses playing the fall guy. It went as incredibly as you imagine. Being on the other side of a fairly large state rhymes with Aska, and out of work, I swallowed my pride and asked for assistance from my father, a place to stay, so I can escape the land of everlasting cornfields and get back on my feet. Remember the Poe's monkey's paw? Yeah, me too. A short month later, I still had no job, despite actively applying and being on the delayed entry program for the military, and was on day 3 of the 3-day no job in 3 days you got to go ultimatum. So where does one go when you have no job, no place to stay, and don't know anyone in the state? You walk the streets because you have no car. Creepy part. I'm walking down one of the main streets in Arizona in the winter. Being night, it's also cold. So I'm decked out in my traditional hope nobody notices me wear of all black with black trench coat. I'm walking toward the local gas station to make use of the change I've accrued for my nightly meal, 99-cent burger. And some random scantily club-clothed lady walks past me headed the opposite direction. About 10 feet past me, she says, "Hey, can you do me a favor?" Odd, but okay, I'll bite. Depends. Can you walk with me? She says, "It's a few blocks to my house, but I really don't want to walk alone." Once again, but I'll bite. Okay, yeah, I suppose. We start walking and now I'm kind of on edge. This could be bait to duck me up and take my coat or something, or she got into an argument with her man who's going to show up and pull a gun on me. Either way, I'm waiting for the other foot to drop. As we walk, a few cars have passed, mostly police cars. I'm not thinking anything of it because Iowa had been stopped, truth, 17 times that night by random cops saying I fit the look of someone who pulled some stunt in town somewhere. After about 4 blocks of walking, she just says thank you and dips down a side street. Okay, no biggie. Girl hadn't said 2 words to me the whole walk. So now I double back thinking, screw it, I didn't get robbed or jumped, and the burger spot is 24 orders. After 5 blocks, I was 2 away from the burger spot. I've seen a couple more cop cars drive past and they're all at said burger spot with their lights on. Yeah, hot dogs for 99 cents it is. I head across the street and hit the gas station. While paying for my hot dogs, I tell the clerk. I guess the cops were seriously hungry. Dude, Cold looks me in the face and says, "Nah, someone flipped out and hit the place up about 20 or so minutes ago." I just blink. About 20 minutes ago, I would have been sitting in that burger joint if it weren't for that random girl. Whoever or wherever you are, girl. Thanks, and I'm glad we got home safely. Story 19. This isn't fair because I work night shift in a psych facility. Basically, I've seen a lot of things working at night, from people coming in high and psychotic to people huddling naked in the corner of a room whispering. Scariest thing I've ever seen was a patient coming out to the nurse's station and saying someone is outside of their window looking in. From admission, they had been experiencing pretty strong hallucinations, so we assumed this was another one. To provide some ease, we went into the room to verify that there was no one there and provide them some relief and comfort. We have removable draw curtains in rooms and they were shut. Walked up to it and asked if it was this window. Patients told us that it was. Drew it open and had quite possibly the biggest scare of my life. There was somebody there, wide-eyed and staring right back at us through the window. He ran off when we saw him and we ended up calling the police as well as security. They never found the guy and we never saw him again. Still creeps me out to this day. Story 20. Context. I worked jams, janitorial, and maintenance services for a local YMCO when I was in college. It was a brand new facility and everything was modern and technological. All lights were motion activated to conserve energy. Every hallway had excellent camera security, with audio, with a control room of sorts, nicknamed the Cave, that fed all of the streams to a couple monitors and housed the building's servers and sound system. Every year we would have a week-long shutdown, which basically entailed all hands on deck to deep clean the entire facility. We'd do stupid crap to keep morale up. At some point, while bleaching pool grates in large 50-gallon trash cans, for example, I had to get naked to dump out the bleach water so as to not ruin my clothes. My best friend would set up ridiculous games she would invent in the gym with all the cool equipment they've got. Most importantly, we'd all get buzzed as duck on energy drinks, and we were allowed to drink alcohol if we wanted to, so long as we weren't handling heavy equipment or highly toxic chemicals. So basically, when we were doing mundane duties like mopping or scrubbing grout. These shifts sometimes lasted 18 to 20 hours because we were all broke and needed money, and it was kind of fun in between all the careening and moaning from the stupid tasks we were given time and again. One night, we finished the pools and moved on to offices. There isn't much technical crap to do in the offices, mostly just scrubbing walls, extracting the carpets, and dusting machines. As such, we designated it a chill night and brought some beer to keep the party going. All doors were propped open, including the cave door. It's well into the night and our boss ordered us pizza. So everyone is taking a break sitting in the common area in the office, cleared out for carpet extraction. Creepy, I hear my best friend go, "Ducking nope." And so we follow her eyes to the cave, and the security camera screens are flashing brighter one by one. We realize we're watching a Zamboni tile scrubber drive itself up the hall and crashing right into the racquetball court glass wall. That's not the creepy part because if you've ever operated a Zamboni, you know the ducker weighs almost a ton, and therefore when it's switched on, it has powered wheels to assist in pushing the monster around. We're all absolutely dreading having to clean up the resulting mess of glass, and not so subtly making plans to beat the idiot that left it on. That's when it gets creepy. Remember how I mentioned our super fancy camera system had audio recording? A voice whispers over the monitor, "I'm sorry." No voice we immediately recognize, and then we realize that we're all here in the office on the opposite side of the building. Every one of us. And we have been for almost an hour. And we had finished the pool deck already. There was no reason to have the Zamboni out since closing up the night before. And we designated that night as an alcohol night, and everyone promised to not touch heavy equipment. If this was one of our own legit duck-up, whoever left the Zamboni on never confessed. And we were a tight-knit group, and word usually got around eventually. Story 21. I worked at a nightclub as a hostess. This isn't creepy, but pretty terrifying. I had a tip jar in front of my desk. It was a Saturday night, so the 2-jar was looking nice. Well, this dude comes up and starts talking to me. Apparently, while he was talking, he nudged the tip jar behind my computer screen, so I couldn't see him steal $20. I only noticed when he walked away and back into the club. So when I did notice, I told security who checked the cameras, saw him do it, chased him down, and forced him to give me my money back. Then, as they were dragging him out, he looked at me with this crazy look in his eyes, saying he was going to wait outside for me to abuse me. It's safe to say I had all of the security guards walk me to my car that night. Story 22. Though I have a few paranormal stories to share, the creepiest stories, sometimes involving people who are just plain weird. I used to work with a popular gaming company and became the shift supervisor for the 10 p.m., 700 a.m. shift. One of my CSA reps was a bit on the creepy dude type. He tends to freak out some of our female staff with some inappropriate jokes, which borders more on lack of tact rather than actual harassment. He'd mostly stop if I tell him so. One evening during our 2 a.m. lunch break, the girls would go down in groups to a nearby 24/7 KFC or McDonald's across the street, while some of us would go to various parts of the floor where we hang to have breaks. The girls came back scared. One was also a supervisor. Apparently, creepy dude was at the main lobby talking to someone who wasn't there. Make matters worse, he brought a weapon with him. Naturally, my girls were freaked out, and the guys on my floor won't approach him. I was tired, swamped with work, and had a deadline for a report in a few hours. So I do not need this crap. Went down, and sure enough, Angel, my creepy CSA, is having a livid conversation with Air. Followed him all the way through the elevator landing. where he was having an argument with some invisible person. He reminded me of an angry Italian with his hand gestures. Normally, I would be freaked out too, but since I was tired and hungry, it's hangry, that overrode any fear I had. Oh, the weapon. It was a kendo sword. I took kendo in my college years, which he would swing around a bit. Pretty much, the guy was skiotes freaking out. He also had this glassy look in his eyes. I yelled, "Angel, WTF are you doing?" He turned to face me, just staring. We did a few seconds of a stare-off, but again, I was not having any of this and said, "Dude, bringing a sword to the office is against company policy. Are you done with the report?" Yada. Like a switch that just turned on. He finally responded how his dead sister was following him, harassing him, and was on her way to harass. He may have touched the hair of one of my girls too, which at this point, I was livid. I forgot exactly what I told him after, but told him to give me the sword and go back to the office to finish work. He obediently complied, and an hour after I made the whole "come see me in my office" routine, spoke to my managers, which he was given some sort of discipline. He wasn't fired for that incident. To be honest, he was scared of me after that. Anyway, kept my eye on this guy for the remainder of my time with the company, as I am dead sure he was legit crazy. I also told him if he needs help with his sister to seek professional help. He did a few more creepy stuffs and would still talk to thin air or walls or a pencil case, but not as bad as the incident with the kendo sword. Ending. On my last day with the company, he gave me his kendo sword as a parting gift. He had my name carved into it. Pretty nice sword. It now hangs above my bedroom. He did got fired a year later due to creepiness and performance issues. Story 23. I work nights for a uniform rental company, running the washers and dryers. Pretty easy gig. Been there 2 years, and Friday actually was my last shift. I got a transfer to the service department, which I start today. My shift in production ran from 12:09 a.m., and I'd take my first break around 2 in the morning. Only once in the 2 years I've been there have I ever been creeped out. I go to take my break, handing off running the machines to our maintenance guy, and I walk out onto the main production floor. I have to cross this huge area covered with tight aisles of uniforms. As in walking, I get that feeling. Like you're being watched. I felt my neck and arms break out in goosebumps, and I get this stupid random though. Don't look to the left or right, eyes locked forward, and pretend nothing's wrong. Stupid, stupid thought that got a grip on me enough to make me abide it. I walked straight and didn't look left or right, across the production floor and on into the break room and outside for a smoke. Immediately, the tension disappeared. I thought it would get worse, considering I was walking out into the dark. But no, it melted away like butter, and I calmly sat out in the night, puffing away and telling myself I was being crazy. Every ounce of dread I had walking through the plant was gone, and I chalked it all up to an overactive imagination. Until my break was over. I walked back into the plant, and it HR'd me again, like a ducking wall. Every animal instinct I possessed was screaming that something was watching me, and whatever it was, it didn't like me and it wanted me out. The goosebumps came back and doubled. My face broke out. The only thing I can equate it with is like, if you get a bad sunburn and your skin starts to feel too tight. By the time I got back to my work area, I was shaking. I don't believe in the supernatural, at least I didn't. But at this point, I couldn't think of anything that would explain that active malevolence that followed me through the plant. I even asked the maintenance dude if he felt anything strange, and he just gave a stupid look, so I dropped it. In my work area, I was fine. There were about 8 other people on night shift, and around them, everything was relaxed. But the moment I walked over into the main plant area alone to unload clothes from the conveyor belt, I got that creeping dread, and I'd hurry along back to the others. After a few hours, I was good. The feeling went away. Whatever evil I was experiencing went away, or at least turned its attention elsewhere. Around 7 in the morning, I found out what that evil was: a ducking cat. By this time, the day shift had come in, and when I ran the conveyor belt, a ducking cat tore by like a bat out of hell. He must have jumped out fence and came in through the bay doors and hid in the plant properly. We'd see cats outside all the time, so it's not really surprising one would get in. I got stalked by a ducking stray cat. Story 24. I work nights alone, but with a sleeping coworker, I can wake up in case of emergencies and at a home for developmentally challenged adults, helping them out with whatever needs to be done, which usually isn't all that much since they sleep. I'm not armed in any way. I would not want to be. And I'm around 5'7" and 140 cloves of pure love. One of the residents, a very autistic gentleman, sometimes has the habit of coming out and asking me in the middle of the night if he can sleep in, if he doesn't have to get up in the morning, like if it is a weekend or his stay-at-home day. He likes to be reassured that he doesn't have to get up, as he hates mornings. He sleeps with his socks on and has a very light, shuffling gait, which is almost completely inaudible. On a shift, I'm sitting in the main room watching a television program about political analysis with all of my attention on the program. All of a sudden, right next to my left ear, a soft voice whispers out, "Can I sleep in tomorrow morning?" and I just jumped 10 feet out of my chair. This guy had snuck up on me, obviously without meaning any harm, but I had to explain to him that doing that was a very bad idea, and that he should let his presence be known because I couldn't guarantee that I might not react differently, and perhaps strike out at him out of instinct if he ever did something like that again. Fortunately, he got the point. He still sneaks around, but now stops some 15 feet from where I am to ask his usual question of if he can sleep in. Usually I know when he leaves his room as the hallway lights turn on via motion sensor, but on that night I was facing away from that particular hallway. Other creepy stuff. Some of my coworkers have also reported unexplained sounds they like to attribute to ghosts, but I never heard of ghosts killing or hurting people, so even if they exist, I'm sure they're pretty chill. Another time I was called to handle the situation as my not yet sleeping coworker was scared out of her mind, since one of the toilets was locked from the inside, but we were the only two people there, besides the residents, all accounted for in their rooms. We considered calling the police, but I figured I could take care of the situation myself. For a brief moment, I was prepared to deal with some random person who had locked themselves into our toilet for whatever reason. But as I unlocked it, it was fortunately empty. It didn't really get my blood pumping though, while my coworker was scared crap less, as I am a pretty calm individual whose only real fear in this world is abstract stuff like running out of coffee and cigarettes. There are many other potentially creepy things out there at night, which have never really bothered me. We have had burglaries and attempted burglaries in the past. Lots of substances at this place and no alarm system or surveillance. Animals doing their things and the relatives of the residents coming by unannounced in the middle of the night. But Mr. Sneaky Pants whispering into my ear in the dead of night has to take the cake. Story 25. Not so much working night shift myself, so much as my work continuing through the night. About 7-ish years ago, I was working on a piece of software at my company which had camera/recording functionality. But because of the platform and length of recording, it was actually taking stills every dozen or so seconds for a stop-motion film sort of thing. Anyway, one night I leave it going to ensure it can 1. Record its maximum length, and 2. Remain stable over long periods of time. So in the morning I got in and sit down and reviewed last night's footage for quality and stability's sake. Quiet and still office with lights on, and a couple people leave, lights turn off. Darkness, darkness, darkness. But there in the faint light from the outside coming in through the window, I see something in the office move. I start to go back and forth between frames when the lights went off and when they came back on, and it seemed a chair had turned all before anyone came in. I sat there and reviewed the footage for a bit before talking with my supervisor, who informed me that the last shift last night ended around 9 p.m., and no one had entered the office between 9 p.m. and 6 a.m. I shrugged it off and continued my daily work, but before I left for the night, I left the camera recording again. Coming in the next day, I reviewed the footage, and again a chair or two had been turned. I told my supervisor again, who again assured me that no one was in last night. But now he too was curious and asked around and was told absolutely no one was in the office at night. So now my supervisor asked me to leave the camera recording each night. And every morning when we came in, we reviewed the footage, and every morning the footage showed chairs moving and turning. Some chairs had moved a few feet even. So on one of the last nights of us using this software, we pointed the camera directly at the row where chairs kept moving. Then with there no night shift that night, we pulled all the chairs to the front of the row to see where they'd be the next day. When we came in the next morning, it was evident they had been moved, as some had been turned and one had been rolled back against the wall roughly 20 feet from where we left it. Reviewing the camera footage showed nothing moved smoothly, as it was 12-second frames, only a set of chairs in a cluster, then a set of turned and slightly moved chairs, and one single chair 20 feet away from the others. We never got a good explanation. We checked with all departments and the cleaning crew. No one had a reply that backed up why the chairs would move overnight. Story 26. I was working on a mine site that was shut down from production because the resource we were mining dropped steeply in price. On night shift, there were 2 blokes in the plant, a guy running the powerhouse, all about 1 kilometer away, and me, security medic, and the only lady, of course, all alone in the gatehouse. The site itself was about 1.5 hours from civilization, and even when I was on day shift, it gave me the heebie-jeebies. There was no toilet in my office gatehouse medical center, so I would have to walk across to the adjacent administration building to turn all the lights on and walk all the way through it to use the ladies. I had worked in this field for a while at this point, at many different sites, and I had never been worried or frightened before, even when wandering around at night on my own. My desk has a window which has a direct view down the access road to site, and as I'm sitting on my computer, I see movement out of the corner of my eye. There's a man walking down the access road toward the gatehouse. AM. My spidey sense is screaming at me, but I don't falter. I email the powerhouse and advise I have someone at the gate and can they call in and check on me in 5 minutes, and open the service window to talk to my visitor. As he gets about 20 meters from the gatehouse, he vanishes. I crap my pants. I lock all the things and call the plant, asking one of the guys to come over, but not telling him why. He arrives and can clearly see I have shaken. I tell him what I've just seen. Oh, that's just Dave. Dave? Who the duck is Dave? He is that bikey bloke that died in the crib room. Didn't anyone tell you the story? Well, no, they hadn't. And assuming he was just trying to freak me out, I conducted a little Google investigation. And sure enough, a man was hit nearby and was brought by his friends to site for help. He died in the crib room. For the uninitiated, the crib room is the lunchroom. So now I don't pee for my whole 12-hour shift, obviously, and close all the blinds. On my next swing, this was a fly-in, fly-out job. I come in on day shift and I'm doing the rosters. The night shift medic tells me in no uncertain terms, don't ever put me on nights here again. I refuse to do them. He wouldn't tell me why. It's okay, mate. I saw him too. Just shut the blinds from now on. Story 27. About 10 years ago, I was an apprentice for a plumber that was contracted with a popular fitness chain. One night I was doing pool maintenance alone, like literally the only one in the entire building. Generally, I would shock the water with liquid bromine and throw a pool floater with a chlorine tablet in it. Well, this particular night, I was out of liquid bromine, so I grabbed a solid bromine tablet and a pool floater. I carved away at the tablet with a knife so it would fit. They are purposely shaped to not fit for reasons I'll explain later. I then had the idea to jam a chlorine tablet on top of it to save me the time of prepping another floater and fishing it out later. I chuck the thing into the pool and head off to change a membrane in a leaky bathroom sink. As I'm unscrewing the faucet, I hear a high-pitched scream. It sounds like a child is screaming their lungs out. It's coming from the pool room. I'm frantic. I start running towards it, thinking I'm going to save a child. As I'm about to round the corner, the scream turns into a very low-pitched hum, almost demonic in nature. I stop, is all I'm thinking. I peek around the corner and bang, the pool floater explodes. Turns out, you can't mix bromine and chlorine in their dry form. The scream was the pressure buildup escaping out of one of the pool floater's holes, and I assume the change in pitch was from it melting. I ended up needing a respirator in order to go fish out the pool floater and open all of the doors. My 1-hour job turned into an 8-hour nightmare. Story 28. Not my story, but my father's. He was a paramedic and got called out one night to pick up a guy who was found dead in his truck. Dude was apparently there a while because rigor mortis set in. To make things creepier, it was apparently in a larger thunderstorm. They get the dude out and managed to straighten all the limbs out well enough to put the guy on the stretcher. It's like 3 a.m. and the mortician couldn't get into the morgue until 4. They opt to drive around waiting instead of posting up at the station. About 15 minutes into the driving, the dude apparently sits straight up and lets out a large moan. Dude was still dead, but scares the crap out of everyone. Later, my dad figured out when you straighten out a regorged body gases shift and cause weird things. Story 29. I work M. One night I picked up OT on the night shift. We get a call for an unknown condition at an address that gets changed like 5 times before we are flagged down in front of a huge Masonic temple by a frantic woman. She tells us that her boyfriend is the custodian and is in charge of locking up every night. He texted her an hour ago saying he had crushing chest pain and shortness of breath, and now he's not answering her text. The door is locked, but she knows he's inside because his car is there and there are lights on inside. The huge wooden doors are locked, so we call for firefighters to break them down. They take like 20 minutes to smash an 12-foot tall wooden door off its hinges. Once we make entry, it's pretty spoopy. I don't know if y'all have ever been in a Masonic temple before, but they're scary as crap with all the lights off. Marble floors and columns, lots of velvet curtains, and no light switches to be found. Me, my partner, the girlfriend, and 5 firemen start searching the place room by room, floor by floor. We are totally expecting to find a corpse and possibly a ghost or two. We clear the first floor and start up the stairs. An interesting thing about Masonic temples is that they tend to get stranger the higher you go in them. By the 3rd floor, all of us are freaking the duck out and jumping at shadows. Somehow, we push onwards to the 5th and the final floor. At this point, there's huge spooky chandeliers, weird symbols painted everywhere, and even the fire lit is getting freaked out. The top floor consists of a big room with a long hallway leading off it. All the way down the pitch-black hallway, we can see a door that has the lights on behind it. We slowly creep towards it, none of us wanting to be first in line. Eventually, we reach the doorway, and after a solid minute of silently mimicking who should open the door, my partner and I agree that we'll do it together. We take a couple of deep breaths, silently count to 3, and throw the door open. As our eyes adjust to the light, we see a middle-aged man jump up from a desk, rip off his headphones, and frantically try to turn off the adult film he's been watching. He apparently had texted his girlfriend saying he had had a burrito for dinner that didn't quite agree with him, and she had wildly misunderstood his text. As we all fled the building, we could still hear the couple arguing as he began to wonder how we had gotten into the building and who would compensate them for their door. Story 30. Oh, I've got one. I briefly worked nights as a care assistant in a nursing home. The building was a very old ex-convent and was pretty spooky at the best of times. There were 3 floors, but I was only ever working on the ground and first floors. One day, about 2 weeks in, I was sent up to the top floor to get something. It was my first time up there, and for the first time, it occurred to me how odd it was that I'd never worked up there before or seen any patients who lived up there. So I'm walking along the main corridor, which is pretty narrow and twisty. Being a night shift, we keep the lights on emergency settings, very dim and on motion sensors, so that the residents can sleep. Suddenly, at the other end of the corridor, I see this dark shape. It looked like the Grim Reaper, with the dark cowl and long robes, and was even holding what appeared to be some kind of scythe, and it was moving slowly toward me. I knew it wasn't a resident, as most of our residents were not ambulatory, and I was pretty sure none of them dressed in dark robes. So I did the logical thing. I turned without even thinking about it, and sprinted back down to the first floor, where I managed to convey through panicky gestures that there was some kind of terrifying monster on the top floor. After about 5 minutes, my coworkers stopped cracking up and explained my mistake to me. You know how I mentioned that the home used to be a convent? Well, apparently part of the deal was that the remaining nuns, who were all pretty old by now, got to continue living on the top floor without nursing care and use the facilities of the home, like cooked meals. And not a single person had thought to mention this to me. If I'd worked days, I would have seen them up and about. But the 8 p.m., 6 a.m. night shift at a nursing home is pretty quiet. The shape I had seen was actually an elderly nun in robes and a head covering, wimple, with a crutch, not a scythe, heading down the corridor to their little chapel as she couldn't sleep. And not, as I had for some reason assumed, the Grim Reaper here to collect one of our residents. I switched off night shifts soon after that. We did also have residents die fairly regularly, and being the one to discover them was never nice. We'd have to do regular listening checks in each room for breathing to check no one had passed away in their sleep. When we did lose someone, it was just plain sad, not weird or creepy. Story 31. I worked starting 3 a.m. at my job in a warehouse-type store. The creepiest thing I dealt with was being a few minutes late for work and needing to walk from the far end of the pitch-black parking lot to the door and wait to be let in. That was until I volunteered to do an overnight to watch the store when our security system was broken. The night started off with me coming in right before the store closed for the night. I got settled into the assembly area and started putting grills together. My manager said she was staying at the front end of the store for the night, so I knew I would be in the back alone. Our lights in the back are set up with motion sensors, so after an hour or something, all of the lights went out. I was in a covered area that has its own lights, so I paid no mind and continued working. Sometime later, all of the lights came back on. I assumed it was my manager walking back, so I sat and waited for a few minutes for her to make her way back to where I was. Nothing. I listened to see if I could hear footsteps. Nothing. So here I am at the furthest point from the front door, and our security system isn't working, and only one other woman in the store with me. My mind started spinning. I thought someone broke in and they were going to find me alone in the back. This is how my life ends. After a minute, I gathered the courage to come out and walk toward the entrance from the store to the back end. As I stood there scanning the room and listening for someone, my manager comes walking in. I tell her what happened, and she told me that was the first time she came back all night. It definitely creeped me out. I decided I had enough of assembly for the night and moved on to scanning products on the shelves. Now parts of the store have some light and others have almost none. I got to the section that had very little light and continued scanning, still on edge from earlier. As I was walking down the aisle, I keep hearing a sort of tapping on metal, and then I heard flapping wings, like when a bird flies off. I realized then that it was probably one of the many birds we have flying all over the store that set the light sensor off. Not dangerous, but definitely creepy being in a dim, empty warehouse overnight. Story 32. Here goes. So, my dad is a career firefighter back home, and he told me this story. Station 2 in his area is allegedly supremely haunted, and I tend to believe him because I've never actually seen my dad scared before until he came home from his shift this day. So they had just a normal medical run about 1 a.m. Dad was the treating EMT for the run, and so when they got back at about 3:30 a.m., he went into the computer room to write up the run report, as is procedure. He sat down at the computer and said he immediately had an uneasy feeling like someone was there. He thought maybe one of the guys had come downstairs from the bunk room to find out what he was doing. So he turned around to walk out into the day room and see who it was. When he turned around, he saw a man in a black top hat standing outside the window. The man turned and walked towards the front door. Thinking somebody was there for something, since it's technically a safe place, my dad jumped up and ran out the front door to find the guy. He was gone. But as Dad went to walk back into the station, the man walked around the corner and through the front door of the station. Didn't open the door, which would have been impossible since the door is locked and requires a numerical code to open. He walked through it and disappeared. My dad said he immediately went up to the bunk room and finished the report in the morning because he was so freaked out. The second story is from the same station and scares the living crap out of me. This guy is a no-nonsense, cut-the-bullcrap mountain of a man who I have never in my life seen smile, and I've known him for almost 15 years now. Him telling me this story was the first time I'd ever seen him show any form of emotion. All the guys were hanging around the day room telling ghost stories, and this guy told them all he didn't believe a word of it, and they dared him to stay downstairs well after everyone had gone to bed to prove it was all bullcrap. So he stays up until about 2 a.m. He turns the last light off and starts up the stairs when he hears a woman whisper in his ear, "He's finally going to bed." The only woman on the department was not on shift at the time, and everyone else was in bed. He swears up and down that it happened, and all of the guys said he looked absolutely terrified. And he looked terrified telling me the story. There's a lot of weird crap that happens in that station. Story 33, long time ago. I worked at a base in Japan now. Most US facilities in Japan are former Japanese bases, and most we share. One particular night I was guarding the fuel depot. No creepy, spooky history to it, just a bunch of big hills where fuel tanks are buried. There is a Japanese neighborhood just beyond the perimeter fence too, so hearing people carry on and seeing house lights are common. Most of the watch I sit in a guard shack at the only entrance and exit. It's a big automatic gate that only I in the office, which is locked because fuel guys go home at 6 p.m. So I'm locked behind 12 feet of fence spanning a 200-yard area with only one entry point. This particular night, it's February. It's about 10 degrees outside, so I cringe to have to do my rounds because it's freezing outside. But oh well, on about my third trip, I spot what looks like a person sitting on one of the mounds. I walk up shining a light and nothing, making my way to the next row. I climb up a mound, look back at the previous row, and there it is again. A person just sitting at the top of the mound. I hauled butt over into the previous row, running about 5 mounds to where the spot is, and again, nothing. I make the rest of my round and walk back to the guard shack. I turn around and the thing, person, spooky ghost, etc. is stand about 10 feet away from the guard shack. I jump inside, lock the sliding door, and just stare out the window. I really studied this thing. There are floodlights every 20 feet or so in the place, so it's actually lit up decently. At one point, I get out and use the Japanese phrase we learn in security training, "Tumare itsuzo," which means stop or I'll shoot. To this day, I don't know why. It wasn't doing anything, but what was I supposed to do? It was so cold outside and it barely moved. Its hair was short cropped around the ears. Body was average for a Japanese. Sex was undetermined, and its clothing, maybe because the lights, looked gray. About 20 minutes after my courageous stand, my relief came and flashed its lights so I would open the gate. I saw the security vehicle, hit the gate button, and looked back, and it was gone. I didn't even tell my relief because we probably wouldn't find anything anyway, and I wanted to get the hell out of there. Anyway, that's one story. Have a good night. Story 34. Worked overnight changing grocery store prices. We were all convinced the place was haunted. Those big, heavy, swinging doors to the back would literally open all the way, and nobody was there. Cans and other products would fly off the shelves. Like Scoot, then go all the way to the other side of the aisle before hitting the ground. My second day, I was working in the freezer ice cream section and heard a triple knock from the back. Decided to answer back. I knocked twice. The knocking continued for a while and followed me down the doors. I found out later that there is no access back there. It's a solid wall. And the one that made me jump as duck if I was alone was when I went to catch a frog that had gotten inside. It went underneath a shelf, so I got on my knees and without looking because I'd seen him right at the edge, I was feeling around for it. And something grabbed my hand. I screamed as loud as I could, sprang backwards on my butt, knocked stuff off the shelf behind me, and ran out the door. One of the managers ran after me and asked what happened. I told her. She goes, "Oh, yeah, that happens here sometimes. Nobody has been hurt though." I then stopped forward so my feet were away from the shelves. That was a very terrifying place. Story 35. I was working in a big resort in Greece where we had 4 hotels located in the resort. I was working in one of the smallest of the 4 hotels where usually at night there are only 2 people working. Myself, the groom, and a receptionist. One night it was ridiculously misty. Maybe happens 3 times while I was working there. I was just standing around the driveway when I see someone approaching from the gate around 4 a.m. Nothing out of the ordinary. But as the person got closer, I noticed it was an old lady in a white nightgown wearing nothing else and walking bare feet. This literally looked like a scene straight out of a horror movie. I kind of froze for a second and thought to myself that I had fallen asleep on shift or someone pulling a prank. But sure enough, this lady comes closer, blank expression on her face, feet completely muddy and scratched up. I slowly walked up to ask her if she's okay, As she got closer, I could see she was really confused and didn't really know where she was. I tried to ask her if she knows which hotel she was staying at and what her name was, but she couldn't remember where she was staying or what her room number was. So we went inside into the reception where my colleague is also doing a double take on this lady and looking at me with a sort of expression like, where the hell did I find this thing? After a few minutes of searching with the names she was giving us and calling the other hotels, we found a family with similar last name she had been giving us. She was really confused and was giving us many names in one of the other properties. So I got the longest golf car we had on the property, put her in the furthest seat in the back just in case she decides to go all zombie mode and take a nice bite at my neck. And off we went to the hotel with myself, constantly looking behind my shoulder like a paranoid 20-year-old every 200 meters. Turned out that the old lady was on holiday with her family and she was suffering from Alzheimer. They think she kind of sleepwalked out of her room and then got lost and confused after that. The mind is a very dangerous and scary thing. Story 36. This is probably going to get buried now, but I worked overnight shifts at a group home for mentally ill adults. I worked alone in this house with 6 severely schizophrenic clients from 12 a.m. to 8 a.m. I had no self-defense training, and we were not allowed to use any kind of psychiatric holds on a client if they got violent. Thankfully, it never came to that, but there were more than a few craps skeeved me out enough to hide in the office for the rest of my shift. One night in particular, we'd just gotten one of our clients back from the psychiatric hospital after she smacked another employee. We'll call this client Susan. Susan was an older lady, a former elementary school teacher. When she was lucid, she was sweet as pie. When she wasn't, she'd walk around the house turning all the electronic things off, saying the storms were going to wipe out all the power and start fires, even on perfectly sunny days. So I go to start my shift cleaning in the bathroom, and at first it was all going fine. Aside from the fact that I was using my degree to scrub crap stains off of toilets and pick turds off of the ground. I walk into the hallway to grab my mop, and I hear Susan talking. You may not know much about the Soviet Union, but their socio-economic and political climate is very interesting. I look down the hall, and her door is open. She's lying in her bed, staring up the ceiling, in pitch-black darkness, teaching a history lesson to ducking nobody. I start thinking this crap is too much for me, so I pack up all the cleaning supplies, put them back in storage, and I go back into the office. I'm minding my own business, writing up client progress notes, and suddenly I hear this clucking sound in the hallway. It's going back and forth, closer and further. This goes on for a few minutes. I turn around one last time, and Susan is staring just past the office doorway. Her head is faced the corner between the wall and the door frame, so I can only see half of her. She's clucking and mumbling to herself. It's 4 in the ducking goddamn morning. I wait until she walks away, shut the office door, and decide I'm not getting ducking hit tonight. Story 37. Worked night shift security at a cloth mill that's been around since the American Civil War. Had a good few spooks while I was there, but 2 really stand out. First, around 5 a.m. on a Saturday, I was patrolling the bridge that goes out over the river, and as I was going to unlock the gate to the bridge, I totally froze. I felt an incredible, unnatural presence, and looked forward to see, underneath a dim light, some kind of distortion in the air. Cloaking devices in movies where the car or ship or whatever phases out and looks like a mirror of what's behind it. Exactly like that, but with some kind of blackened aura around it. I waited a moment, staring at it. It slowly undid itself, and I began to calm. I went about with my rounds, trying not to think about whatever it was. Second one happened about 2 weeks after. I was walking through the cotton opening room, and I was overcome with that same feeling that something unnatural or malevolent was nearby. I looked ahead and saw a small tuft of cotton floating in the air. Cotton often floats about in there, but this tuft was dead still. I walked towards it, eyes locked, waiting for it to move. No circulating air at that time of night. I waved my hands above, below, and to both sides of it, and yet it still didn't move. It was totally frozen in place. I turned to walk away, made a few steps, and whipped my head back to it, and it was lying on the floor. I have no idea what could have kept it suspended like that. Story 38. I'm an aircraft maintainer in the Air Force, and I have been on night shift pretty much my whole career. There is a form of servicing we have to do on the aircraft called laxing, which is where you service the aircraft with liquid oxygen for the pilot. This job is dangerous, so you are the only one allowed in the vicinity of the plane, and you're wearing a bunch of gear. I had to do a locks job on the other side of the ramp from everyone else, essentially away from everyone. I finished my locks job and hopped on the aircraft to take down the numbers for our forms. In the process of me putting power on, I heard this horrific happen from what felt like every corner of the plane. When you're alone in the dark, in a large, dark plane, all you really can do is panic. Turns out the shutoff valve where I was servicing had frozen itself open and had proceeded to piss liquid oxygen everywhere. So not only did I have to change my pants, I also had to redo the job. Story 39. I worked in a home-like facility for the elderly. I had a woman who liked to wander a lot in the nights, and I had to keep her out of other residents' rooms. One overnight shift, I was sitting on a couch at the front of the facility. I had a clear, straight view down the hallway. I saw what I thought was the wandering woman go into a room that wasn't hers. I quickly got up from the couch, walked straight down the dark hallway, and peeked into the room that I saw her walk into. The only resident in the room was the one that belonged there, sleeping on the bed. I went to the wandering resident's room and found her still asleep in her own bed as well. I immediately knew I'd seen a ghost-ish spirit. Although I acknowledged it, I still was shaken. I sat back down on the couch and stared down the hallway for most of the night, not really wanting to move. My shift ended and I went home to sleep for the day. Upon returning from my shift the next evening, I was informed that the resident in which I thought I saw someone going into the room of had died very suddenly during mid-morning. It was a little unsettling, but had to recognize that maybe one of her loved ones on the other side was there to get her ready. Working with death often, you are privy to these types of things sometimes, some of them more nerve-wracking than others. 19 hours later. I'm adding just one more little tidbit from a night shift. While working around 2 or 3 in the morning, I was standing in the middle of a living room that is lined with bookshelves on one side of the room. I was thinking about a particular resident that actually did not take a liking to me. The resident had passed away about 6 months previous. At the moment I was thinking about said patient, a book falls off of the bookshelf. The book literally came off of the shelf and landed on the floor about 6 feet away. I would say it flew off of the shelf, but maybe nobody would believe me.